Good morning, Earthlings. Good morning, YouTube. As you can see, we're here at the Martin Luther King National Historical Park, and we are going to be taking a dope tour of everything MLK has to offer, what he's offered to the world and what he's done for the world. So let's get this party started. Let's learn, get some education, guys.
Okay, he's born the day after the Emancipation Proclamation passes in Greene County. So that makes him one of the first persons in his family born free. No pressure. So as he's getting raised in Greene County, Georgia, his father, like many free black citizens, becomes a sharecropper. And he's growing up out there in rural Georgia. Like his dad, he becomes more of a self-educated country preacher. But he keeps hearing from all these travelers passing through about how a ton of free black citizens are heading to the city of Atlanta, where there's more opportunity for community, livelihood, social advancement for that community. And by the time he's 30, he has heard about this so much, he says, there's gotta be something to this. Dad, love this for you. I'm gonna go to Atlanta and make my own way. So in his 30s, he's got about $5 in his pockets. He shows up to Atlanta in the 1890s. So he's not doing bad for the time. And he gets a small congregation together that's only about 13 members initially. They hold service round robin style in each other's living rooms for quite a while. But soon this will not be enough space to hold that congregation because AD is an excellent preacher. And within 10 years, he takes that 13 and he grows it to a congregation of 400 members. And by 1922, they have raised enough money to build their very first own place of worship, Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is our link stop number 1, if anybody's following along at historytouratlanta.com on that mobile link. Now that being said, right from the very beginning, Ebenezer here is known all across the city as the Movement Church because AD here is on the forefront of this movement sweeping the nation. A lot of gospel preached before the 1890s was very brimstone and hellfire and fear tactics based. You know, we do right by the Lord so we don't burn forever. We have a chill afterlife. But this movement, social gospel, they're really more focused on things like, you know, that's cool, but while we do that, why don't we also use the word of the Lord in the Bible to positively affect things in this life? So they're very focused on community, you know, the 10 Commandments really being dictated and how to behave in this life as well. In fact, the phrase, what would Jesus do, commonly known today, coined by social gospel preachers like AD in 1897. So he's on the front of this movement. And just, you know, because of that, his church, his congregation is growing and changing, as well as the citizenship of Atlanta and what that looks like. Because just like AD, we have a ton of free black citizens moving here for that opportunity for social advancement and livelihood, which does exist. However, there is a black professor across downtown Atlanta, Professor W.E.B. Du Bois, and he is watching all this change happen from Clark Atlanta University. But he's a professor, so he's taking notes. He starts to see this pattern. He says there is this opportunity here for us, but he says they can only seem to get so far in mainstream society before he says their community is being caught behind this vast veil of segregation, racism, and bigotry. And he uses the word veil very specifically because they can see through that veil to the rest of that opportunity. They just can't seem to break past it. So all of these racial tensions boil to a head for a number of reasons into the 1906 Race Riot. Now, the Atlanta Race Riot of 1906, I think is more aptly termed a massacre. It's one of the largest race riots in American history. 1,000 white citizens tore through the streets of Atlanta, killed 100 black citizens. It was so massive, it made French headlines in 1906 across the ocean. So, at this point, Du Bois, A.D. Williams, all these black leaders, they have watched this riot happen. They've watched other massacres happen. Finally, Du Bois stands up and says, this is not okay to be happening. We are free citizens, and Atlanta and the country needs an organization that is willing to stand up and fight on behalf of its free black citizens. So Du Bois found the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, or the NAACP as we know it today, and he's focused on it's a national branch, but he needs someone he can trust to run this first Atlanta local chapter. Suddenly it hits him, oh my gosh, y'all. Social gospel Reverend A.D. Williams. He is the perfect guy to be this first local president of the NAACP. They offer the position to AD, he accepts. So with this leadership position, he starts getting black voters registered to vote. In the 1920s, very difficult due to voter suppression, which we'll talk about as we go. But in 10 years, our guy AD here gets 2,500 black voters registered in the city of Atlanta, which might not sound like a huge number to us today, but at this time, it was enough to get 18 new schools built for the black community around the greater Atlanta area. So this guy is wild busy, y'all. He is head of this major congregation that's growing and changing. He's getting voters registered. He's building schools. And I don't know when he sleeps, because on top of all that, he also is a family man. He's got a young daughter, and at this point in our story, her name's Alberta Williams. She's 19 years old. She is educated. She's getting her degree at Spelman, the all-girls school. She's sophisticated. And unknown to his daughter, Alberta, who also is musically inclined, she likes to play the organ most Sundays here at her father's services. Unknown to her, there is this young man in town who is completely and totally in love with her. The story goes that the second Michael King saw Alberta Williams sitting on the Williams family front porch where she liked to hang out, he pretty much said, "That is her, that is the woman for me, that is the girl that I'm gonna marry." And he goes around the neighborhood telling everybody this. Michael King has never even spoken to or been introduced to AD's daughter, Alberta. So a little bit about him, he's also son of a sharecropper, much like her father, more of a self-educated country preacher, though he does have some formal education. And he's really smart, he's making things happen for himself. So of course his friends all say, "Michael, you have lost your mind, or your religion, maybe both, if you think this sophisticated, biggest preacher in town's daughter is even gonna look your way. Get real, man." And Michael King, he understands what they're saying, but he's also known for his determination. So he comes up with this plan, essentially, to try to get an introduction. He decides he's gonna take his Ford Model T car to that stretch of Auburn Avenue where the Williams family home is. He's gonna take his car there every day and park it next to this corner park right across the street from the porch where she likes to hang out. And he's gonna stand there and he's just gonna take his Ford Model T and he's gonna polish it for like a few days, right? And she knows everyone that lives down this stretch of Auburn. She knows this guy does not live here. She's like, "Who's this crazy dude?" Finally, she's intrigued enough. She gets up, she walks down the steps, she starts crossing the street. He is freaking out. This is the moment. He knows exactly what he's gonna say. He gets all puffed up and he says, "Hello, my name is Michael King and I have been preaching in 2 churches now. What's up?" That's pretty much her response. She's the daughter of the biggest preacher in town. So she's pretty much just like, "Oh, that's really cute. Good for you. Bye." And kind of just walks away. So he is so embarrassed. He feels like he has absolutely blown this moment. He has lost his shot. But they do cross paths a week later, okay? And he says to her, "You know, hey, Alberta, we met a week ago. You probably don't remember me. That's okay." But she takes him by surprise. She looks him dead in the face and she says, "No, Michael King, I do remember you. My father, Reverend E.D. Williams, would never forgive me for forgetting the name of another preacher." So, of course, this ever-gusty, determined young man takes this as a sign from above. He asks Alberta on the spot if she would consider being courted by him, so he's kind of slowed his roll up a little bit. And she's impressed by his determination, so she says yes, she agrees to this. He goes through a lot of trouble to get himself enrolled in Morehouse College because he's got to impress her dad. He's this upstanding leader. And Morehouse at the time just so happens to be the all-boys school right across the street from Spelman, where she attends. Who's to say that that was purposeful? But he does get into Morehouse. They do really hit it off. They finish their degrees. And the Williams family loves Michael King. He's cut from the same cloth as AD. So the couple gets married. They say, "Move into this family home. We'll get some generational wealth going." So when A.D. Williams passes away, the ownership of that family home gets passed down to Michael King, as well as the pastorship here at his father-in-law's church. And within 5 years of taking on that pastorship, Michael King has not only doubled the size of that congregation, he's pulled them up out of financial issue and taken Ebenezer from being one of the top black churches in the South to one of the most prominent black churches in the entire country. So to celebrate all this success from these humble, rural beginnings, he decides to treat himself, okay? He's gonna go to Germany. He's still doing some mission work, but he's studying the teachings of someone in his religion that he really admires, and he's so moved by what he learns in Germany that when he comes back, he sits on it and he decides, this is a sign for me to shed my country boy name. And he decides he's been so moved by these teachings that he's actually going to change his name and take on the name of that famous Protestant reformer he was so moved by in Germany. So Michael King goes ahead and he changes his name to Martin Luther King. But he's consistent, right? He's a preacher, he's a family man. So he's got to change his junior's name here, his little 5-year-old son, from Michael King Jr. to Martin Luther King Jr. And this young man grew up to change the nation and the world. And all of that starts right here with Ebenezer Baptist Church in 1922. Now that being said, that does mean this is the church that him and his siblings were raised in and around. It's also the church where he gave his first sermon and some of the last sermons of his life, as Atlanta served as his home base from 60 to 68. Now they no longer hold service within its walls, as it's owned by the National Park Service today, and it's been taken back in time in its interior to serve as a historic exhibit, though today it's closed to the public due to COVID-19. But they do still hold service in New Ebenezer right behind us, so I like to point that out as well. Now, also, they could not fit their congregation in Old Ebenezer today, and New Ebenezer actually can hold up to 6,000 congregants per service, and their current reverend is our state senator, Senator Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock. So,
wow.
Shakers still coming out of the King District. Now, that being said, y'all, we're going to go ahead, even though we can't go inside, we're going to get up and cross the street just to get a little up close and personal with Ebenezer. Check out that historic marker. And if anyone has any questions as we go, please feel free to just jump on in and ask.
Wow, guys, I did not know a lot of that information. So we are going to get a lot of great things about Dr. King and his teachings, his upbringing, even his family. So let's keep on with the tour and see where we go next.
Now we're going to talk about some history that isn't often discussed. It just begins what we refer to as the 6-year tragedy of the King family. Because a year after his assassination in 1968, in 1969, his little brother, A.D. King, was actually found dead in a swimming pool here in Atlanta. And it was reported as a drowning incident, but no water was found in his lungs upon autopsy. So many people thought this was a second assassination on the King family. And then 5 years after that, in 1974, their mother, Miss Alberta Williams King, was actually playing the organ inside the sanctuary, as she had many Sundays throughout her life. And halfway through that service, a young black man from Ohio who was not in his right faculties, he had very odd ideas about the church, he would stand up halfway through that service, he would exchange words with that pastor, and then he would choose to open fire on those in the sanctuary. So there is a small memorial inside the interior of Ebenezer, and that memorial does include Miss Alberta Williams King, who sadly would pass as a result of this, and Deacon Boykin, a long-standing deacon. So of course now within 6 years, Rev King Sr. has lost both of his sons and his wife. He would state to the public at that point he felt he had given all he had been called to give in service to the Lord. So he'd be spending a year tying up loose ends, making sure they were in good hands and moving forward, and then he would famously discontinue preaching. So obviously this church ultimately is such a source of progress and love and hope to our nation, but we really want to pay respects to the real sacrifice ultimately given for the progress the King family achieved. Now that being said, y'all, we'll go ahead and kick our story back to the beginning as we head into Dr. King's neighborhood. Black Panther movies.
Yes, we love the Black Panther movie.
Yes, me too. Do y'all remember the beginning of the first film where the kids are playing basketball at that court in Oakland, California? Yeah. Welcome to Oakland, guys. That was filmed right here.
Wow.
Avengers films are filmed in the Southeast Market here. So definitely really amazing. We have a huge film industry here. This is where that spaceship would also appear right over them at the end of the film. Now the reason we like to bring it up is because this building that you'll notice, there really was that rundown brick building you saw at the beginning of the first film. And the production company would actually completely redo this building as part of the process of the film for the community. So not only is it an iconic black film filming in an iconic black neighborhood, they're also taking their production budget and really helping out the communities they're filming in, which
wow.
we absolutely love. They would justify that by filming in interior apartments for several scenes before turning back Lee Street Towers over to the senior citizens that live in it today. So pretty cool. Because they will come into play in just a few stops. It's kind of weird we have two big major Baptist churches so close to each other. But they will get themselves a brand new social gospel reverend that comes into play, like I said. So I want to point out how close they are. And a little bit of trivia. Does anybody know what a red door on a church in the Southeast means? Any guesses? I know, right?
They've been there a long time?
That's a great guess, but actually it means they're out of the red, y'all. They've paid off the building. They own it. What's more important in the South than Jesus and money, am I right?
That's right.
Quality is more important.
fundamentally, the 1906 race massacre changed the city. Before 1906, Atlanta was divided into 4 quarters, or wards. We are currently standing in our old 4th ward. And back when A.D. Williams first moved here in the 1890s, this was one of the most racially integrated areas in the entire Southeast, with black and white people living next to each other, working, homes side by side. But the 1906 race massacre changed all of that. Directly after, strict Jim Crow segregationist laws were put into place, controlling where people could live. Black people fled to this neighborhood, while white people had to abandon it. A year before the massacre, there were 5 black-owned businesses along this street. Just 1 year after the massacre, there were 29. Now, John Wesley Dobbs, featured here in the statue, would have seen all of these changes take place. Just like A.D. Williams, he didn't have much of an education due to the grinding poverty he was subjugated under, but he was so smart and such a voracious reader that after passing the civil service exam, he became one of the very first and few black postal clerks in the South. He quickly gained prominence and wealth and became a figurehead of the Auburn neighborhood. He was considered the mayor of Auburn Avenue, and he's the one who gave the neighborhood the nickname Sweet Auburn. He said it was the wealth that made it sweet here. And this really was a wealthy place. I know it looks a little run down today, but Fortune magazine in 1950 said that this was the richest Negro street in the entire world. Yes, Negro street in the entire world.
That was the actual headline in 1956.
Yeah, and it truly was. If you were black living in America in the early 1900s, this was the place to be. You had famous people like Alonzo Herndon, who was Georgia's very first black millionaire. He had the offices of his financial firm along the street, as well as Henry Rucker, who was our first black IRS tax collector. You could get an amazing meal at Ma Rainey's Chicken Shop, or you could walk up the street to the Royal Peacock to see amazing acts like Duke Ellington play. And this would have been the atmosphere that young Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would have grown up under all this wealth and prominence. But that being said, segregation was never far behind. The Jim Crow laws of the early 1900s controlled everything a black person could do, where they could live, eat, pray, sleep. When ML was only 5 years old, he went to go play with 2 of his neighborhood friends, whose dad owned the local Auburn neighborhood market. But when he got there, they told him they couldn't play with him because he was black. He was heartbroken. He went home crying. That night at his dinner, his parents had a long talk with him, going over for the first time the race problem here in America. After that talk, at some point, little ML said, "Why don't white people like us?" His mom, Alberta Williams King, in that calm, soothing voice, told him it's because they don't understand that we're all the same, but someday it will be better. Little ML, not even 6 years old, looks at his mother and says, "Mother dearest, one day I will turn this world upside down." And he does, thankfully. But before we leave and learn a little bit more about ML's life, I'd like to talk more about this sculpture here. This is the likeness of John Wesley Dobbs. It's called Through His Eyes. It was created in 1996 by the artist Ralph Campton. It's called Through His Eyes because you're supposed to go in behind it so you can actually look through the sculpture's eyes. If you'll notice right here under the highway, these aren't bus stops listed. These are the buildings and stores, markets that would have been here before they put the highway in, back when John Wesley Dobbs lived here. So if you go along to the inside, you can see what he would have seen living here at Sweet Auburn Avenue, as well as some quotes and sayings on the inside.
And that also means that those murals underneath are part of this art installation, because as you gaze through John Wesley Dobbs' eyes, they really want you to imagine the way this street really continued into downtown. They built the white people to run this interstate straight down the middle of the richest black neighborhood in the world at the time, and run it over much of the neighborhood too. It's not like it was just empty space they ran it over. So
it was very important, those businesses, as you can see here. And we also have a picture of John Wesley Dobbs, so you can see that the likeness is very accurate.
Funny, I know somebody's already wandered into the mind of Dobbs, but if anybody wants to check it out,
All right, guys, we're going to take a look through the mind of Dobbs in his eyes. Let's take a look. Let's see what he sees. So there's that mural that goes in. This is the richest black neighborhood and street that was in America at one point. And those murals, those are all black owned businesses beyond it. And this is a white, actually controlled highway. quotes. Just good information. We are literally standing like in the minds of Dobbs. This is like amazing. Absolutely amazing to see what he saw.
A lot of homelessness are separated from the neighborhood. Brick building right across the street from us. It looks very unsuspecting today, but it's actually one of the most important buildings in American history, and not just because it's our link stop number 3, blah, 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 but also because of what this building contained. In its heyday, in 1960, when Dr. King would come back to Atlanta, he would found the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, his organization to fight racism, and his office at that time was inside of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge building. And not even just that, y'all, his office was next to, as in shared a wall, with John Lewis's offices when he was here in Atlanta as the head of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Upstairs above those two gentlemen was the first black radio station in the United States, WERD, which is where the phrase "word up" comes from. And it even housed a Madam C.J. Walker franchised hair salon here in this building. So ton of movers and shakers, y'all. It's filled to the brim with them. And it's built by another mover and shaker, none other than our guy, John Wesley Dobbs. Because in 1932, he goes from being the unofficial mayor of Auburn Avenue to the official mayor, the official Grand Master of the Prince Hall Freemasons, or the traditionally black fraternity branch of the Freemasons here in the United States. And he decides his first act as Grand Master is going to be to build this gorgeous Masonic building. They can have businesses, they can have business leader meetings. They don't have to ask anybody's permission to do so. So once the building is built, he can kind of step away from the project. He's like, what else am I going to do with this leadership position? And he decides to look at an issue that has plagued the black citizens of Atlanta and the nation for the last 80 years up to this point in our story, which of course is voting registration. Now, in cities like Atlanta, though there are free citizens with the right to vote, there's a lot of voter suppression happening against the black community. An example of how they're doing this in the 1930s actually lies with our Reverend King Sr. Now, Rev King Sr. was commonly called Daddy King around the neighborhood. So one day he actually goes downtown to register to vote. He gets to that building and the voting registrar's office is on the second floor. Daddy King says, no problem, I'm gonna take the stairs. For some reason he can't take the stairs that day because they are cordoned off. The stairs say white only. He says, that's super weird. I'll take one of these 3 elevators here. 2 of those elevators say white only. The 3rd elevator, the worker or freight elevator, it's only able to be used by black customers 1 day a month, 1 hour of that day. And it's whatever day and hour the white people who bought the building pick. There's no way to even know that's getting honored at all. Luckily for us though, y'all, Johnny King here, John Wesley Dobbs, they're around the same age. They have kids around the same age. They're neighbors, they're buds, okay? So they team up actually. They get together. The suspense is killing me. They get together, y'all, and they make essentially an Avengers team of black voting registration. They get so good at getting black voters registered in the 1930s that together these two get 12,000 black voters registered in the city of Atlanta in 10 years. It's a huge difference. It changes the game. Because at this point, black leadership are supporting this guy for mayor of Atlanta. His name is William Hartsfield. So if you flew through our airport, that might ring a bell. Now, Hartsfield actually would win the mayorship of Atlanta thanks to that push in the black vote. And he's considered the first mayor to have openly valued that community with public policy. He actually appoints the first 8 black police officers here in the city of Atlanta. He installs electric lighting down the miles of Auburn Avenue for that neighborhood, and he opens the first city parks with tennis courts and swimming pools available to black citizens. Now, I'll be real with y'all, at this time in history, those parks are still segregated, but most southern cities have not even arrived at that idea of every community deserves the same types of facilities. So, our guy Hartsfield is slowly but surely pushing things in the right direction, and lucky for us, he's gonna ramp up as time moves forward. So we'll talk more about how Martin and Hartsfield play off each other as we go. But I do want to get some women up on this tour. So if you guys don't mind, we're going to sneak a peek at that Madam C.J. Walker franchised hair salon right now. Okay. So, Sunday off. Good for him. He works very hard. Double check. Yes, he's going to take Sunday off today, but that's all right. If anybody's in town for the next week or so, you want to check out Reese's spot. He is usually here, at least on Saturdays, if not during the week, usually after 11 o'clock. But he is actually an international stylist who used to work at a different salon in the area. And he passed by this and he saw the original Madam C.J. Walker awning. He realized the history of this location. And Madam C.J., of course, is very famous, a very famous marketer, actually. She essentially developed multi-level marketing for marketing hair care tools and products to black women of the time. And she's one of the first self-made black female millionaires, or female millionaires in general, in the United States. And so really, really incredible. He knew what the history was. He'd just show up once a month to sort of pay homage. And then as he was looking for a new private space to purchase, he realized the city was putting up this space for lease. So he grabbed it, and somebody had left a collection of original Madam C.J. Walker hair salon tools that were used by her last living agents. So he's taken it upon himself in his own private salon space to preserve many of those artifacts, as well as artifacts from WERD. So the Park Service has just purchased the building. They're going to renovate the front of it back into time, but they're also going to let these vendors stay here. So it'll be this really amazing mix of federal and locals funding, kind of keeping this history alive, which is amazing.
Isn't there a movie made on her?
There is. Right now there's a short, I think it's a short series on Netflix called Self-Made, and it stars Octavia Spencer, who's always phenomenal to watch. So really, really great. All right, y'all. Feel free to sneak a peek in the window and see what you can see. They're not too much movies. Yeah.
Just like my parents see. Yes.
Wow.
And if anybody has time to check out Reese's shop later in the week, it's literally like stepping through a time portal. It's pretty amazing. All right.
This is the I Am Somebody's mural dedicated to William Holmes Porter. See that?
And actually, this
Amazing.
mural itself was also painted by Biondi DeForest, who is Reese's son, who owns that Madam CJ shop. So really big effort. Yeah. Yeah, Biondi.
Good info.
Welcome, everybody.
It's the most photographed place in Atlanta.
It's so exciting. You might recognize it. If anybody's a Walking Dead fan, you'll recognize this view is where Rick rode his lone horse into the post-apocalypse city of Terminus for the first time. They also filmed many scenes for that series off this bridge. And you'll see a ton of musicians, young artists out here at sunset at nighttime trying to make their own music videos, make their own movies with the Atlanta skyline as their backdrop. So I used to live right off that balcony, and you do see it all here on a good sunset. Photographers line the bridge. You see wedding photos, graduation photos, proposals, the whole gamut. And y'all know we are not going to bring you to the most photographed location without getting photographs of your groups, everybody. So exciting. So I'm going to go ahead and get...
Go figure. But it was a large brick affair, 9 bedrooms. So quite a huge distance to come from the early roots of poverty that the King family was under. Now they were one of the most prestigious, wealthiest, well-known families in the entire city. Back when ML was a teenager, he was quite a clothes horse. He was a very dandy, fastidious dresser. He was known in the neighborhood as Tweety because of all the tweed suits he wore.
It's like a teenager, like a young teenager.
But he wasn't just superficial. He also had a great big brain on him. He graduated high school from Booker T. Washington High School at only 15 years old. So that's the same high school that his grandfather, A.D. Williams, had helped found as part of his efforts with the NAACP. So it paid off really quick. Yeah. After graduating high school, ML went on to go to Morehouse College, staying here in the city. It's that famous all-black college that we have here. And just like his grandfather, great-grandfather Willis Williams, his grandfather A.D. Williams, and his father Martin Luther King Sr., he also was drawn to the ministry. So he began to minister very early. When he was only 18, he gave his first pastoral sermon to the congregation of Ebenezer Baptist Church, and that same day was considered a full-fledged minister. He also continued being an overachiever, and he graduated college at Morehouse at only 18 years old. Now, why do you think he graduated so young? Was he just an amazing scholar? Did he just really want to get out there? What do you think? Why did he graduate so early? It was sibling rivalry.
Oh,
His
wow.
older sister was graduating from Spelman that same day, and he didn't want her to beat him. So he raced ahead and made sure he graduated college early. So that's a picture of both two of the King children graduating the same day, one from Morehouse and one from Spelman. Quite a proud day for the King family, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
What's the age difference?
3 years, yeah.
Wow.
So she's graduating on time, and he's just trying to race.
Yeah, he literally was like, you're not graduating undergrad before me. You're 3 years older than me. So he pretty much graduated high school at 15, went straight into college. Literally they graduated the same day with their undergrads. And I love Christine's face in this picture because her face really says it all. It looks like, really, you couldn't give me a single day.
Yeah.
That's smart.
Yes, that's for sure me and my sister. So I love that.
Yes, sisters. I feel like we got
All right,
The 1906 race massacre changed the city, and about how before that Atlanta was an integrated place. No more so than this street, Houston Street. There were 46 houses on the street, and 43% of those houses were owned by black people, the rest going to white people. The majority of those homes were built by one building contractor and his son, Alexander Hamilton, and his son, Alexander D. Hamilton. Now, if that name sounds familiar, yeah, it should. The family believes that they are related to the Alexander Hamilton, the founding father. But our Alexander Hamiltons, the building contractors from Atlanta, were black. And the father was born enslaved, despite being related to a founding father. But after gaining his freedom, he quickly gained prominence in the building community, growing his firm in popularity. And then afterwards, his son, Alexander D. Hamilton, took over and really expanded the firm. They built some of the most important buildings here in our city. That includes the Butler Street YMCA that we talked about earlier. That's where young ML learned how to play basketball. He also built Graves Hall, which was the dormitory at Morehouse that ML lived in, as well as when John Wesley Dobbs was looking for someone to build that Prince Hall Masonic Lodge that we saw at the beginning, where the word radio station, that was built by Alexander D. Hamilton. This gorgeous blue house right behind me, this would have been Alexander D. Hamilton's home. It was 126 years old and was recently renovated and turned into an Airbnb. So if you'd like to stay in a little piece of civil rights history, please feel free to do it. It's gorgeous inside there. But it's easy when you look at a home like this and some of the beautiful homes on this street to forget the subjugation that black people experienced during the 1950s. A.D. Williams, Daddy King, Alexander Hamilton, they would have all lived in beautiful homes, quite grand and comfortable. I mean, even by today's standards, that's a beautiful house. But despite their prominence in the black community and their wealth, despite the fact that all these men spoke regularly with the mayor of Atlanta, they still had to deal with Jim Crow second-class citizenship. Nowhere did that slap harder than in the busing system, where black people were forced into inferior seating. So in Montgomery, Alabama, where our hero, Martin Luther King Jr. is now living, he becomes the pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in 1954. Shortly after that, a seamstress and NAACP activist named Rosa Parks refuses to give up her seat on the bus, and for this she is arrested. The black leadership gets behind the black community and decide to boycott the Montgomery bus system. Now, who do they choose for their leader in this boycott? None other than fresh-faced, just 26-year-old Martin Luther King Jr. But it's that gravitas, that esteem. For 381 very long days, the black citizens of Montgomery, Alabama, do not take the bus at all. So that's walking through all kinds of weather, carrying their groceries, sometimes several miles every single day. But after 381 days, they've gained national and international interest, and finally, the national bus service is integrated. But think about how crazy that is. Only a couple years earlier, Martin Luther King was cheating at Monopoly on his friend's carpet, and now Time magazine has named him Man of the Year. That's quite a big way to come. And no one is more surprised than his old neighbors and friends here in Old Fourth Ward. A.D. Williams writes to his daughter and says, Martin is the most amazing orator for his race in America today. It is almost unbelievable. He beats out Borders and the rest. And it really is incredible just how much attention Martin Luther King has gotten. And the city itself is listening. Hartsfield Jackson, who was our mayor at the time, called Atlanta the city too busy to hate. And we really wanted to be a civil rights capital. Because of that, Our Mayor Hartsfield, as well as A.D. Williams, who is the Wheat Street Baptist minister, they joined together to peacefully integrate Atlanta's bus system. So when Montgomery had a boycott, we did it peacefully here through a partnership with the black and white leadership of the city. At that same time, in 1961, A.D. Williams' daughter was the first black person to apply for and receive a public library card. A.D. Williams, died the same day that the Atlanta school system was integrated. So though it was short-lived, he did get to see that dream come true of his. Yeah, so he definitely saw a lot, A.D. Williams, in his life.
Was that Dobbs that died, or?
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. You're right.
No, you're good. Your turn.
Sorry,
There's a lot of names on the floor, everybody. You're doing
sorry,
amazing.
It's my first time. No, thanks. But we're not only, it wasn't just Atlanta that was listening to Martin Luther King. Really, the whole nation had turned its eyes to hear what he had to say. And that included a young 15-year-old boy from Troy, Alabama, who listened to a sermon of Martin Luther's on the radio, and it changed his life. He was so inspired, he decided to devote the rest of his life to the civil rights work. He's a personal hero of mine. That little 15-year-old boy was John Lewis, who we'll hear more about as we continue on.
Yes, I love that.
So guys, these are the homes that are historic and they are not allowed to change. This is exactly what it would feel like if we were back in the Dr. King days. This is exactly what we would see. Relaxing atmosphere. Wow. These are historic buildings that we actually get to see up close and personal in the Atlanta, Georgia area. Amazing. Dolly Parton's Heartstring was filmed in this neighborhood on this street here. Look at that.
Beautiful yellow and brown Victorian home across the street from us. This is the house that Reverend A.D. Williams purchased for himself and his family when Ebenezer Baptist Church started really taking off, which means that front porch is where his daughter Alberta Williams, at the time was her name, liked to hang out. And his name at the time was still Michael King. He would have brought his Ford Model T right here and stood here polishing it. That introduction that he would blow. But it would work out. He would eventually inherit the ownership of this home. And actually, Martin Luther King Jr., his son, and Martin's two siblings were not only raised in this home, all three of them were actually born in the principal bedroom upstairs in this home. So very, very good energy, juju in this particular plot. Does anybody know Martin's birthday by any chance? Martin Luther King Day just passed, so we might know the month. It's January, one day.
15.
Yes, January 15th. He was a Capricorn for the cause, everybody. Amazing, I love that. Now, though the house is actually closed for tours to the public right now due to COVID, we do get to sneak a peek of some of the rooms on these plaques off to the side here. So we're going to go ahead and check out those plaques so we can get a little bit of look at our family here. In this oval is going to be our OG King family with Rev King Sr. here in the center. Miss Alberta Williams King next to him, across from her mother, Jenny Williams, who lived with them till she passed. Down here we have all three King siblings. We have A.D., the youngest, Christine, the oldest, and Martin, the middle child. There he is in the middle of his own two oldest, years later. Now that being said, this house is very, very gorgeous. When you first walk in through the front door and look straight to your left, this is the very first room you'll see. In fact, the two windows behind this couch are the windows behind that hanging porch swing right there, to give you all an idea. Kids not allowed in this room, okay? This is just for Bible study. This is for strategy sessions, adults only. Then we had the dining room in between that and the kitchen downstairs. Across from those are Christine's room. Upstairs, the only room we have pictured is that principal bedroom where all three King siblings were actually born in the interior of. Now, Christine, given that she's alive today, was a major resource in bringing the interior of the home back in time. They would source wallpapers and floorings from the correct years. If they could not find an exact match, they would find something as close as possible. When Christine did that final walkthrough to check its accuracy, she said it was so close it was eerie. It was like stepping into her childhood. The only thing she said that is incorrect was a doll on her bed. She said, that's not right. And they said, Christine, we are so sorry, did you not play with dolls? And she said, no, I did. But y'all, like, I had 2 brothers, okay? So they would pop the heads off my dolls and play baseball with them. Those dolls would not have made it fully intact like that. So that's the only thing of note you could find that was off. But that being said, this house is gorgeous and large, even by today's standards. And our man John Lewis, though he would rise to the same level as Dr. King of being one of those big 6 civil rights leaders here at the end, he did not grow up in any circumstance as nice as this. John Lewis's family was significantly poorer than the King family, but they had that radio. He heard that radio address by Dr. King, and he said, "This is my call to action. This is my purpose." And as soon as he was old enough, he held true to that. He started working with the movement by joining the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, an organization of young activists approaching approaching integration through nonviolent means like lunch counter sit-ins, boycotts, etc., marches. And so John works with SNCC from 1960 to 1963 as a young man. He actually becomes the leader of the Nashville lunch counter sit-ins. He becomes an original freedom rider, trying to integrate national bus services, and our guy John gets in so much good trouble that he gets arrested over 40 times in those 3 years for participating in anti-segregation law protests. So SNCC approaches John in 1963, and I imagine that conversation going a little something like this. "Hey John, you might be having trouble finding a job. And we know that you are dedicated. And we need someone dedicated to be the new president of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Would you want to accept?" He says, "Yes, of course, that's the dream." They say, "Great, John, you're moving to Atlanta." So they move him here to head SNCC. He's working right next to Dr. King's offices in the Grand Lodge during the week. He's going to Ebenezer services on Sunday. But I will quickly interrupt myself to ask y'all the question, when we heard about or lived through the movement, did we hear a lot going on about the city of Atlanta in particular?
No, not really.
Not really, right? Like Birmingham, Montgomery, Little Rock. That is very purposeful, because this whole time back here, the mayor, as Ariel told us, is on this big PR kick, making Atlanta, the city too busy to hate. And it's been working. It's creating this safe haven for these leaders to plan and strategize the movement, and then maintain this safe haven by going out and doing those examples, doing those strategies in other cities to be able to maintain this safe haven to return home to. So of course, about a week after John Lewis moves to town, it's kind of emptied out, because now they're gonna all head to Washington, D.C. It's August 28th, 1963, and they are heading to make a big example in Washington with the March on Washington. So it is a sweltering day in August in DC, and Martin's actually the very last person slated to speak that day, and the audience completely is over it. They're just done with it, but he is not deterred. Nevertheless, he gets up in front of the Lincoln Memorial, who signed the Emancipation Proclamation into effect, and he poses a question to the country without ever actually asking that question. He says, "They are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied?" He says, no, we will not be satisfied until truth rolls down. No, we will not be satisfied until water rolls down like justice.
Justice rolls down like water.
Justice rolls down like water, and righteousness like a mighty stream. I know this. We're going to see if I can get it up on my tablet, because I think it's about to die, which is why I was going to go ahead and just do that.
All right, guys, I'm going to take it over from here, Earthlings. So actually, the quote that she is trying to say is right here. All right, guys, that was a wrap of the tour. It was amazing. It was great. We're leaving Freedom Hall now, and this was amazing. Like, this was an experience like no other. I'm so happy. I got a lot of great content for you guys. This was an experience, and I'm happy that you guys were able to experience this journey with me. So let's head back to the car, and let's zap on out of here, y'all.